Hi, I'm Phil from Turbo-Mini.com and welcome to part 2 of how to rebuild your Turbo SU carburetor. For those of you that missed part 1, I'll put a link in the description below. For those of you that did see part 1, well, here's the finished article. If you want to know how it's done, stay tuned and find out. Grab a brew, let's crack on. So the carb's been in a bath of thinners for the last couple of days. As you can see, it's come out pretty clean, not bad. If you're doing like a concourse restoration and you wanted it absolutely spotless, then something like vapor blasting would probably be the best thing. But it's got all the dirt and the crap out of it, so and it looks pretty tidy, so that'll do me. So float balls come out as well. You can see, yeah. So pretty happy with that. One last thing we're going to do before we start assembling it is I'm going to get a tin of carb cleaner there, aerosol. I'm going to squirt it into all the orifices, and then I'm going to get the airline on the compressor and I'm going to blast out every single little hole and orifice just to make sure every last bit of dirt and crap's out of it before I start assembling it. So I'm going to do that now. I find when assembling something like this, it's best to do it on something like a clean sheet or towel like this, something soft, and then if you do drop one of the small screws or something, it doesn't tend to go bouncing off like it would on a hard surface, so you tend to not lose stuff all over the floor. So the first thing we're going to do is install the new throttle spindle bushes. So these are a little tubular bush like that sits in there where the throttle spindle runs through. So in the last video you'll have seen me knocking the old ones out, so we now need to press these new ones in. So for this, use a correctly sized punch, which is that size, so it's the same size as the throttle shaft, and obviously it's got a shoulder on it there, so you can slide the bush on to the punch like that and just line it up on the carb, and then you can tap it in. So we're going to sit the carb on a bit of wood down here so it doesn't get damaged while we're tapping it. And just literally line the bush into there. It doesn't take much, so we're only using a small hammer. You don't need to whack it in, just a gentle tap and it'll eventually start dropping in there. That's it. So that's the first one done. Obviously it stops when it gets up to the shoulder on the punch, so as you can see in there, the bush is pressed in there, and now it's just the same on the other side. So slide the bush onto the punch, set it on the wood. Keep tapping away gently, no need to whack it. And there we go, that's the other bush in now. Next we're going to fit the throttle shaft, so brand new throttle shaft from the kit, brand new butterfly. You'll notice this is a plain disc, unlike the butterfly that came out that had a little like spring loaded poppet valve in. They can cause all kinds of trouble when the spring weakens and they don't shut properly or they get stuck. Plus it's a massive restriction to airflow, so nice plain throttle disc in there. and then there's a couple of little screws that hold it to the shaft, and you'll notice if we can focus there, they have a little split in the end of them. So when you fit them through the shaft to hold the butterfly on, you actually stick a screwdriver in the end and just flare the ends. That's to make sure that they never screw themselves out of the shaft and come loose, and obviously your engine will ingest it if that happens, so you don't want that happening. So once you fitted them, just remember to flare the ends out. So take the throttle shaft, it is symmetrical, so it can go either way around, doesn't matter. So we pop that into there. There you go, nice and smooth, fits in there. And then get this, there is a number printed on it, as you can see there. So that should be, if you have the carb in its normal orientation, so upright like that, the disc should, when it's facing you, should face, the number should face you, and it should be at the top. So if we put that in there, slides in. There we go, it fits in there. Then you just get one of your screws. Don't nip the first screw up initially, just put it in till it's somewhere near tight but not nipped up, just so the disc can move. Then it helps so you can line the second screw up just so it's sitting spot on. Again, leave that one slightly loose and just get a bit of movement, move around, just make sure it's sitting where it wants to be. Then go ahead and nip the screws up. Nip them up gently. It's only screwed into brass. And then try the throttle shaft. Perfectly happy, it's not catching. And it's moving as it should. So there we go, that's the throttle shaft in. As I was saying before, if we now turn it over, you can see the screws there sticking out the other side of the throttle shaft. If you just put a screwdriver in to the split and just give it a bit of a twist, it'll just flare the screw out. Don't do it too much because it'll actually break the end off, so if you just put it in gently, just give it a bit of a push. There we go, and it just flares it out, and then that'll stop the screws coming out now. Right, so next we're going to fit the jet holder and the retaining nut. You don't get new ones of these in the kit, so you'll have to just clean your old ones up and recycle them. So if we look in the bottom, it goes into there. So the short bit, so that end of it, the short end, that goes inside first, and just goes up there. And then the retaining nut goes on the bottom there, just screws in. And if you look on the other side, you'll see it's come up onto the bridge there. So the jet is just sitting there, the jet holder's just sitting just below the bridge, sorry. So we've got that. And then we just give that a gentle nip up. Again, there's nothing that needs to be seriously torqued up on these, just a good nip. You're using mostly brass parts and into aluminium body, so just give it a good nip. Once it's nipped up, that's it, just leave it at that. There we go, good nip on that. Right, and that's in. Next up is the needle valve and the seat. This is something that causes a lot of issues, as you see the little needle valve there, the pointed tip, that actually ends up, it sits on this seat here and it ends up wearing, and then you get flooding as the needle valve doesn't sit properly on the seat and it doesn't seal properly, so you end up getting flooding issues. So this is the kit comes with a new one, so we're going to put that in next. There is a little gauze as well, if you can see that there, that actually sits on the end of that there. So push that on, and then that actually screws just below into that orifice below the where we've just put the jet holder. So we're going to put that into position now. Just again give that a bit of a nip up once that's tight. That's it. Right, so we've got that in now. So next up is to fit the float assembly. So we've got the float itself, and then there's a little shaft that it runs on, and then we can actually put the needle valve on the seat then, because the float will retain it. So the first thing to do is to pop the needle valve in there on its seat, so get it the right way up, so the pointy bit goes onto the seat. So that's in there, and then there's actually like a little soft alloy washer goes onto the shaft on the end, so we put that on, and then we can pop that in the side there. And if we get the float, sit that in. So that sits in there like that. So if we get a screwdriver, we can line that up. Again, give that a good nip up. Right, so that's in. So there's the float assembly in. There's a little tab there that actually sits against the needle valve there. So that's what actually holds the needle valve on the seat, and then as the float drops, it allows fuel to come into the float chamber. Then when the float chamber fills, the float rises and it seals off the needle valve. So that's what regulates the flow and to keep the even amount of fuel in the float bowl there. So you do have to actually set the float height by bending that tab. So we're going to do that next. So now we're going to set the float height. So this is the float obviously sitting in here. This might be quite difficult to see, but if you can see the edge of the float there, that part of it, that wants to sit between 1mm and 0.5 millimetre below the face of the carb here. So if we put a straight edge across the carb, we should be able to put, there should be a between 0.5 mil and a 1 mil gap between that part of the float and that straight edge when the float's set correctly. So at the minute, if I pull that straight edge away, you should be able to see the float actually is sitting slightly above the carb face there. Just do it. So if I push it, so I put my straight edge on it, it actually disappears a bit. You can see it just drops down. So that's actually not set right at the minute. So what you do is you bend this little metal tab that's here, that sits on the needle valve there. You actually need to bend that tab up this way so the float will actually drop. So that's what we're going to do now. So if we just give that, again, you've got to be gentle with these things, so it's just a slight tweak on it. So we give that a bit of a bend, and that's dropped down. So now if we put our straight edge across there, the float's below. So I've got that now, so if I put the straight edge on and get our 40 thou feeler blade on, put that under, level the carb up a bit. That's absolutely spot on. So the jet itself sits inside there, is held by the bimetallic jet holder, so you just pop that through there, hook it round, and it actually sort of hooks on like that. And then the jet goes down inside the carb there, into the jet holder there. Slide that down. That's it. And then, so that sits in there like that. And then there's a screw with a spring on it. That allows the bimetallic strip to move to alter the jet. So we just screw that into there. Give that a nip up. That's that. And then the mixture screw goes in there, and it actually pokes through and pushes on part of the bimetallic strip, and that's what alters that levers on that, and that's what alters the height of the jet. So when you're setting your carb up with your mixture screw, that's what's moving, and it actually alters that, the other end of the jet, which sits in the bridge there. So when you wind the screw in, it moves that and actually pulls the jet down, which lowers it in the bridge, which richens the mixture. If you do it the other way, it raises it in the bridge, which leans the mixture. So that's how you set your idle. So we're going to put that in now. And a good base setting for setting your mixture just to get it running is to set the jet there so it's level with the bridge, and then do 2 full turns clockwise on the mixture screw. That'll lower the jet, and that's a good initial setting to start off with. These float balls, they can actually warp, so it's worth putting a straight edge across it and just checking it. If it is slightly out, you can remedy it by, if you remove them horns there, you can put it on, if you've got a good solid piece of flat glass, and put some wet and dry on it, and you can resurface it by doing that. But if it's out a long way, then you're never going to get it. But if it just needs a touch to seal it up, then you can do that. Now it's just a matter of popping the carb onto there. Make sure you get that the right way around. So there's a little sort of little well there in the bottom. That needs to line up with the jet, which is facing that way. So that needs to sit, so the jet sits into that. Make sure you rubber O-rings in place nicely, then it should feel right. Yeah. And then the kit comes with 4 new screws, so just bob them in. So again, these just want nipping up, but instead of, I wouldn't nip the first one up straight away, so just get them all screwed down till they're close to being tight. Do all 4 corners. So if you get them to a point where they're just starting to tighten up, and then just try and work your way evenly so you've got an even pressure on the rubber O-ring in there, rather than nipping one corner up and then just working your way around. If you do one side, nip it up a bit, then the other side diagonally from that, and across, and then again, and then just once you get to that point, just give them all a good nip up. Double check them, so that's got a good nip on it. That's it. There we go. So that's the float assembly done and the throttle spindle fitted. Next we're going to fit the choke assembly. Right, so onto the choke assembly now. So this is the actual choke mechanism body, and I'm going to have to actually do a repair to this because there's a little collar here which shouldn't come off. That should be fixed onto there, and it actually allows the choke seal, which is there, to sit inside it there. But this collar, when I've got to disassembling the carb, it's actually got a split in it, so that is just falling straight off. And there's actually a hairline cracking it across there, so that's not tight. So I've made another one up on the lathe there, So I'm going to press that on and just Loctite that into position, and then that'll rectify that. So I'm just going to do that now before we get onto the rest of the assembly. Right, so I've fitted that new collar onto there now. That's been Loctited and then pressed on. So that's sorted that out. There's two O-rings that sit on here. One in there and one in there, in those grooves. I've removed them, so we're just going to pop the new O-rings on now. It's just a matter of stretching them over gently so as not to damage them. Just slide them down into the first groove. That's one. Then the second one. That's them two on there. Get rid of that. That sits inside there. So I've stripped that out, just giving that a good clean out. So that can just be popped inside there. Right, and we can fasten that onto the car body now. Right, so if we put the choke mechanism onto the car body now, there's a little paper gasket, if you can see there. You've got to put that on between that. So there's a little cut out there just to line up with that hole. So you just pop that in, make sure you get this the right way up. So that way up. Get the gasket in line. Pop that into there. And just push that in. It'll take a little bit to push it in just because it's got the O-rings on it to seal it. And just line the screw holes up there. And then there's two screws. You don't get new ones in the carb kit, so again you just got to recycle your old ones. One in there, one in there. Screw them in. That's right. That a bit of a tweak up, not too tight again. Need to be forced. That's it, right. That's that bit in. Next thing is, there's a choke seal there. It's the same as the seals that fit on the throttle shaft, which we'll be doing later. So that just pops into there. Give that a helping hand in there. Again, be gentle with it. You don't want to damage the seal. So just gently squeeze it in. And just push it in flush. That's it, right. So that's in now. Next thing to do is to you might find your carb has one of these little plates on. I've found them with and without. But if you've got it, that pops on next. Sits in there, and then the spring goes on. The straight, if you can see there, there's a straight part to the spring there, and then there's one with like a 90-degree kind of angle on it there. The one with the straight tail goes up to the top there, sits up at the top, and there's a little slot in the sort of the plate on there that it sits in. So that sits in there like that. So you've got to twist it round, if you can see there, anti-clockwise till you get right round down here, down to the bottom. And then that little hook at the bottom of the spring, that actually hooks onto the choke, like a lever around there. Get that the right way up. So that goes onto the slotted part there, goes onto the actual shaft that goes into the choke mechanism there. So you put that on, then hook that round. That hooks onto the spring, and you've got to try and twist the whole lot while the spring doesn't tangle up. Get it round to there, It's a bit of a fiddle because you're fighting against the spring here. That's it. Right, we're on. And then the next thing to do is obviously just check that the mechanism moves smoothly. The spring should return it. Shouldn't be catchy, no, it shouldn't be stiff. The spring needs to be able to return it to the stop under its own pressure, so you need to make sure it's smooth and that's working. So that's absolutely fine. So that's working as it should. Then there's a little lock tab there that sits on the end of the shaft. Then there's a nut goes on. 7/16 spanner for that. Give that a nip up. Just go until it wants to stop. That's it. Check it works again. Yep, still smooth, not sticking at all. That's fine. And then just bend the little lock tab up there and a suitable screwdriver. Bend them up. Let's get some pliers, just give them a gentle squeeze. That's it, there we go. Right, so that's finished. It's all working as it should. So the next thing we'll do is we'll pop the levers and the seals on the throttle shaft. Right, so we're going to put one of the throttle shaft return springs on and the idle control lever. So first there's a seal goes on the throttle shaft, so it's one of these. Now you must get these the right way around. On a normally aspirated engine, I'll try and get it focused here. It's a lip seal, so there's a flared side to it, if I can get focus. There's a flared side, like a hollow flared side, and then there's a flat side there. So the flat side on the turbo carb, that flat side goes to the outside of the carb, so that's the face that you see when it's installed. On a normally aspirated carb, you actually put them in the other way around because it's constantly under vacuum, and so it pulls against the seal to keep sealed. But because you're because it needs to seal against boost, it needs to go that way with the smooth face on the outside. Then it'll push into the back of the seal and flare the seal, and obviously seal against any fuel or air and fuel mixture escaping out by the throttle shaft. So get that the right way around. So we'll just install that. That's the same seal as fits onto the choke shaft that we did before. So that's just a matter of pushing it onto the shaft and just gently helping it into the recess on the carb body there. Right, so that's in there now. There we go. Next, something you don't get in the kit, and you don't always find them fitted on the carbs, but this one, there's a little plastic washer, like spacer, that goes on the seal next. If you've got them, again, they don't come in the kit, so that's just a matter of recycling the old ones. So I'm going to put them on. The next thing is to fit the spring. Now these are right and left-handed, so you need to get the right spring on the right side, basically. So this side, if you see there's a tall straight part of the spring there. That needs to sit against that part of the carb body, the side of that. So we're going to put that, so it goes on there over the throttle shaft, and then that sits up against that, if that's clear. There. So just on that bit, that lines up with that. So that's how you know that's the right one for that side. And now you need to wind the spring around, actually wind it around clockwise now. So wind it around like that. Keep going till you get to about 8 o'clock or so with the other part of the spring. And then this is the idle control lever. That goes onto the throttle shaft, and there's a little hook on it there. My finger's tapping. That needs to hook onto the spring, the part of the spring you've just wound round with your other hand. So that goes, keep winding the spring till it, and push the lever on, and then that hooks onto there. You can see there that's hooked onto it there, and then you can test that. There you go. That moves and that returns under its own pressure from the spring. Just make sure that's on properly. Yep. Right. Again, there's just another little lock tab like we did on the choke mechanism. Little lock tab and a nut to go on 7/16. So just pop that on. And give that a gentle nip up. That's all that needs. Then the lock tab over again. Get them started. And just give it a little squeeze with the pliers. And that's it. That's that part done. So we're going to go onto the other side now and put the other spring and the accelerator arm onto that. So this side, again, first thing, just put the seal on the shaft. Gently push that in. There we go. Right. That's that on. Push it down properly. There we go. Right. Again, we've got the plastic washer. Pop that on. Next thing to go on is the spring. So there's a straight edge to it there. That sits actually on top of that sort of square portion of the carb there. So slide that over the throttle shaft, and then it just sits on there, and that's what stops it moving against that. The next part that goes on is this little piece here, which is what the spring actually sits against to put tension on it so the throttle shuts when you let the accelerator off. So that goes on. Next we need to wind the spring round anti-clockwise to about 5 o'clock or so, and then pop that on, slide that down, and then the spring just hooks against that. So there we go. Yeah, that hooks up against that, as you can see there, spring. So now if we turn the throttle, so that you can see the throttle disc moves, and it's got two springs now to return it shut. That's that. The next piece that goes on is the arm for the throttle cable. That sits on there, up against that, and then again there's just a little lock tab goes on, and another nut. Need to nip that up gently. That's it. Then the lock tabs over. And then that part's done. So before we move on to the dashpot assembly, the last thing to do is put the idle control screw or idle adjustment screw in. It's much like the mixture adjustment screw in that there's a groove in it there, and there's a little O-ring just needs popping into there. So I've picked the old one out, just going to slide the new O-ring on. That just sits in that groove, that's that, and then that just fits down into the carb body in there, and that actually pushes on that. When you wind that, it actually moves that, comes down in there, and it actually moves that arm, which in turn moves the throttle disc, which is how you adjust the idle speed. So we're just going to pop that in there and just screw that down into that. Until it just starts to come out and make contact with the arm there. So there we go. That's in. So next job to do the dashpot assembly. So I've just given the dashpot a bit of a clean up. Again, I'm not trying to create a concourse carb here, just something that's clean and tidy and functional, presentable. So I made this little rig up here, so it's just got a bolt through there, washers, and the other end, and then you can just pop that in the chuck of a drill press and spin it up. And I've just gone, while it's spinning around, I've just put some wire wool onto it, and I cleaned up all the oxidised mess off it, so it's presentable now. So I'm happy enough with that kind of finish. So we'll get on to assembling the dashpot now. Okay, so we're going to assemble this now. So this is all had a clean out. It's been soaked in the thinners and washed out and blown out with the airline. So the first thing to do is put the spring inside, and then the dashpot piston just slides inside the chamber there. Give it a test up and down. It should be smooth, it shouldn't stick anywhere, it shouldn't be any grinding or anything. So that all feels good. So that pops out the top there, and then there's a little circlip, wire circlip there, that just needs to go onto the top there. There's a little groove around the top, and this just clips into that just to stop it falling out. That's it, that's on there. Now that's all one piece. The new circlip you get in the kit, so that's the new one on there. And then you need to take your needle, which doesn't come in the kit. You'll need to buy the needle separately if you need a new needle. And then the little needle collet there, again you need to just recycle your old one there. So pop that into there. That just then goes into the bottom of the dashpot piston there. Slide that in, and there is actually like a cutout in the needle collet there. You need to face that to the hole on the dashpot piston, as there's a screw goes through, and that's what sits against that groove. That's what actually retains it and holds it in there, so you need to line that up. So push that in, and the collet should line up so it's flush with the face of the piston there. So just push that until that's completely flush there. That's it. And then just put your screw in. So that's the dashpot assembled now. Next thing to do is take there's a rubber O-ring. There's a groove around the top of the carb body. This is unique to the Turbo SU to seal the dashpot. So just take your O-ring, make sure obviously that groove's all clear of any debris, and you've picked the old one out, and just pop your new one in there. Give it a gentle push in so it's in all the way round the groove. It's sitting in there properly. There we go. Right, that's in now. And then you can put the dashpot and piston on now. So there's a groove in the piston there, which lines up with a little metal kind of tab at the front of the carb there. So you need to put those into line, and you need to make sure when you're pushing in that your needle goes into the jet hole there, and you're not forcing the needle and bending it or anything. So I'll line those two up. So get that in. That's it, and then line that up. And the dashpot will only sit on one way around to line the screw holes up, so conveniently that's right. So there we go, that's on. Make sure that's all sitting down nicely, yeah. And then there's 3 new screws that come in the carb rebuild kit. So just pop them in. Just tighten that down till it's just touching. There we go. And then that one, and then that one. Again, just tighten that till it's just touching. Same on that one. Alright, then I'll just nip that one up a bit more, work around, nip that one, that one. Right, so that's tight, and that's tight. Right, next thing to do would be to fill it up with oil, but as this is going to be hanging around for a while, I'm not going to put any oil in there at the minute. There is a little fibre washer goes on top of that. And then we've got the actual dash pot plunger. So the fibre washer goes onto the plunger there, and then that just screws into the top. Obviously you put your oil in first if you're about to run it, but as I'm not going to do that at the minute. So just put that on, and then the final thing is you get a little, again unique to the turbo carb, is the top of the dash pot is machined with a groove there, and there's an actual little retaining clamp here which goes into the groove and over the top of the dash pot plunger, and actually clamps them two together to stop the dash pot plunger flying out under boost. Now there's plenty of people that run without these, and to be honest I think I've only ever heard of 1 or 2 people where that's come out under boost, and that was people running pretty serious boost levels. Personally I've run without it. If you profiling needles and messing about with oil weights and stuff, it's convenient to not have to keep taking that off. But again, if you wanted it to look original or whatever, or it's just standard and you're not likely to be messing with stuff like that, then by all means pop it on. One last thing I'll just mention, when I put the screws on for the float ball here, there is supposed to be some little spring washers that go under there, but they're actually missing from my kit. So I've just actually put a little dab of Loctite on them now to hold them, but they are supposed to come with some little spring washers, but like I say, they were missing out of my kit, but it's retained by Loctite, so there'll be no issues with that. So that's the carb completely finished. You can see all the parts that we've changed sitting here. Hopefully you found that video useful. If you are finding these useful and you're enjoying the videos, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on another one soon. Thanks a lot.